Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Radiant Lawcast. I'm your host, Sena, and joining me for the very first time is my brilliant colleague, Robyn Bronstring. How are you doing, Robyn?
Good, thanks. How are you, Sena?
Welcome to the Lawcast.
Oh, thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Good. I've been trying to get a lot more people to join me on this journey, but then I'm glad you finally answered the call.
Well, felt like I had to.
And
The pressure was on.
I gave you a choice, didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
I think I did.
Yeah.
I think I did. We're just going to chat quickly about your role at Radiant, particularly specific in relation to intake. Talk us through what is intake.
Sure. So intake, I think, sounds foreign to a lot of people, especially if we use the word triage, which, I mean, we use a lot on my specific accounts. And people immediately think, oh, like medical triage, right? No, so intake is basically the first step in the contracting process. It's how we get instructions from the clients and make sure that we have complete and accurate instructions ready to go so that our lawyers can start working on them. So it's that first step in the process.
It's the first step in the overall contracting process from when we receive the email saying, hey, help me with this.
Yes, exactly.
Cool. And then how does your experience in trying to tame intake at Radiant demonstrate its importance and its effectiveness, or, just the need to have someone just on top of intake all the time?
Yeah, because there's so many different accounts at Radiant. Obviously, each account side to do its own sort of thing in terms of what worked best for it, what worked best for the particular clients. And at the moment, we're sort of on a journey to make sure we can streamline that process. So bring it in line with a standard process as much as possible. So this involves, weekly meetings between myself and the intake process group. We go through all of the steps. We look at ways that we can standardize, ways to improve. So that's, where our focus lies in terms of reining it in. Because what we've seen is if intake goes wrong, it goes wrong not just there, but for the whole contracting process. It means delays, and it means that the lawyers run away with the completely wrong agreement to start off with. So
if in the beginning we get it wrong, then there's challenges along the way. I always look at intake as the process lead, the intake lawyer as the one who leads the entire process, because ultimately you're the first one to get the instruction. You're the first one to decide what needs to be done. You then tell the rest of the firm that, look, this is what we need to do here. We need to review, we need peer risk review, we need to mark up, we need to negotiate, blah, blah, blah. But there are some challenges that come with intake.
Definitely.
Are there any that you've experienced since you joined Radiant?
Yes, so the first thing I noticed was that we had this very concrete sort of form, and there has to be very specific questions answered on this form, and that gives us an idea of, which direction you want this contract to go in, or what the instruction's even going to look like. And what we noticed was that due to, our clients being all over the world, there are some language barriers, which means that it's not always easy for clients to understand the form outright, or even to understand, what questions we're asking or what we need from them. So we've gotten into a process now of simplifying that as much as possible, taking out any, that horrible legalese nonsense. Including
simple language.
Simple language, keeping it straightforward, using examples as well, we've seen has helped a lot.
Okay.
Being clear, being concise, using links as well to training and guidance for the different people that are answering the forms as well. So
So I would say a lot of our initial interactions as Radiant may not be people who are lawyers, right? So they might not even understand what they want, right?
Yeah.
Does that happen a lot, where a client comes and says, look, Robyn, can you pick this up for me? It's just an agreement. I have no idea what to do with it from start to finish. I don't know what this is. But then you also need to have some commercial information so that you can best bring your legal experience into it. When that happens, right? So when commercial comes to you and they have those challenges and those gaps, how best do you bring them on board? I know you've mentioned links and you've mentioned simple English. Are there any other methods that you use that you bring them on course on the journey of understanding what exactly you need from them?
Yeah, of course. So, we're very available to our clients. We make sure that we have dedicated email addresses specifically for them to contact us if they have any queries, if they're unsure, if someone's picked up their matter, or if they're unsure where to go, what guidance they need. So we try to be accessible from that point of view. We try to make sure that we are answering them promptly, within our dedicated slots.
And we use a lot of tools, different tools at Radiant. We use different tech at Radiant. one of the things in one of our accounts that I'm across is we tried to use forms, intake forms, which help commercial sort of steer them in a particular direction. It's like, you give us all the information that we need. Have you found that that's helpful, or do you think that actually just ping me an email with everything you need?
The form is helpful just from the perspective of there are certain nuances that come into every sort of contract.
Yeah.
And if it's just the matter of getting an email, sometimes you don't pick up on those things. So yeah, forms are very useful as opposed to an email, because in an email, the business person or procurement contact who we predominantly deal with, we don't really deal with the legal advisors that often until, later down the line if you need to rope in clients legal.
Yes.
But the procurement contacts and business contacts, they won't always know exactly what information to give us to make sure that we can help them. So that's where the form comes in and makes sure that we have exactly the information we need. We know what services are being provided.
Yeah.
We know which business units providing this, is acquiring the services. We know all of that stuff. Which region, which jurisdiction, which wouldn't always be at the top of, their mind to give us.
No, awesome. And then besides the form, are there any other tools that you're currently trying to implement across the intake team across Radiant? Or it's just the forms and just trying to get as much from the client as possible?
Obviously, forms are a big part of it, but at the moment, the standard operating procedures also come into play. So that's something that we are trying to standardize across intake.
What are the standard operating procedures, or what do you, for people who outside of Radiant, who may not understand what we mean? I mean, know SOPs, we hear SOPs, but someone outside of this may not understand the context with which what are these standard operating procedures?
Yeah, definitely. So a standard operating procedure, it's essentially like a checklist or a process that we follow every single time. So everyone's always on board with the process. They make sure that they are going through that process whenever they pick up a new matter for intake. So keeping themselves on track to deliver exactly what we need. Yeah, and any questions or weird things that come up in the intake process, they'll be answered via the checklist.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And based on your experience, your journey to date, I mean, before this, you did different kinds of law in Durban, and then you moved to Cape Town. Mm-hmm. So from your experience and, since you joined the firm, what are some blue sky ideas that you would implement to improve the intake process at Radiant?
So Radiant really opened me up to how technology can help us. So the traditional law firm space is very much like paper and files and print everything, copy everything. So I
haven't had a leverage file in years.
No. I have one for like filing random documents that happen to appear, but that's it. So the traditional law firm space is very much, we stick to what we know. Yeah. But Radiant is all about expanding on that, using technology, using all the new tools that come up to make sure that we can keep up to date with the trends, and using that to, advantage our clients as much as we can. So as an example of a blue sky idea that we really hope we can do would be to have a centralized intake hub for Radiant Law where all clients can log in and immediately input the information we need into that form. So it would sort of take out a lot of the delays in the process, automatically generates everything we need, and kind of removes the need for intake lawyers down the line. So
and then obviously the main cause or the main objective is when a lawyer like yourself picks up the agreement later on down the line, you know exactly where to look for when you have questions. One of the things that lawyers do, I'm not guilty of this, very innocent. We tend to guess a lot of points, right? Industry colleagues will.
We think
you think right? You're not an expert in, I'll say, media. You may not be an expert in finance or banking or some of the other brilliant things that some of our clients do, right? You may not know all of that stuff, but at times, because we've grown up with the one idea that lawyers are brilliant, we very often don't want to ask a lot of questions, or you don't want to seem like you're asking too many questions because it may give off the impression that you don't know. Now, when a lawyer picks it up later on, that intake process is very important, just helping them understand what exactly I need to do. Because there's a lot of arrogance in our profession, you'd have to say.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I've come across some very interesting, arrogant characters.
Think it turns out later on that you don't. So that's the importance of intake. Just to wrap up, what are the sort of 3 takeaways that from your experience and from this process that you feel you've learned and that you can, take forward in your journey here at Radiant?
Well, first and foremost, I think, I've only been at Radiant for, just shy of 18 months now.
Okay.
And
Make me feel like a veteran.
and, it very quickly was sort of given these huge opportunities that I didn't think I'd be able to handle for a very long time. And Radiant gives you the tools to be able to actually handle that stuff and make sure that clients are still getting, the quality that they're paying for. That's the one thing. I didn't realize how much growth I could have over such a short period of time. So that's been really, inspiring for myself.
It is. And you've been brilliant at it, I must say. Just taking on the intake role, and driving it forward and making all the changes. That's commendable, very commendable.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So kind. Excuse me if I'm blushing. One of the other things that I've definitely learned from this experience is that there's no idea that's dumb or that you can't suggest or you can't feel like, oh, that's never going to happen, As I said earlier, technology changes so quickly and there's always going to be new tools available to help you achieve whatever you want. Those blue sky ideas soon are going to be the run of the mill, So that's another thing is, sky's the limits. There really is nothing that you can't do.
So you mentioned earlier that intake is important, that bad intake can be disastrous, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned that the arrogance of lawyers sometimes can get us into trouble down the line.
Yeah.
Whereas you probably don't understand an instruction, but you're running with it and giving all the advice and feedback and points, whereas maybe you could take a step and say, let me get this right from the beginning.
Exactly.
You did say intake can be disastrous. Can you just take us through your thoughts in relation to that?
So, So as I said before, intake is the first stage. So that's when we need to make sure that all of that information is there. We need to know, what the service is going to be, how it's going to be used, and, simple things like payment timelines or jurisdiction and those sorts of rules. We have to be aware of all of that stuff because, the last thing you want is to be, 3 months into contract negotiations and all of a sudden it comes to your attention that, oh my God, the SAS terms actually were applicable to this agreement, which would have changed the whole course of what you had been negotiating. So that's when I say bad intake can be disastrous. It can lead to substantial delays, especially if it's been a contentious negotiation,
You're negotiating annual price increases for one off job, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Wouldn't work.
Why get it? Why are you wasting everyone's time?
Awesome. Well, Robyn, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. And thank you everyone for watching. Please join us next time on the Radiant Lawcast. Cheers.